if anybody goes after Jim Garrison, he goes after me. So really, if you're that much of a Garrisonite, I have doubts about you. I mean, you're not really as smart as you think you are.
See, in that, he reveals his Achilles heel.
Yeah.
This is the fundamental problem with conspiracy theorists. They are not arriving at conclusions based on reason and logic. They are arriving there based on reasons of emotion and subjective interpretation. Yeah. What is the best proof that the JFK assassination was a conspiracy? Well, people just feel that it is. You know, what good is that to me? What difference does that make to me, you know? Oftentimes in conversations with conspiracy theorists, they'll say things like, your Warren Commission. It's like, bro, I'm not even 40 years old and I'm Canadian. It certainly is not my Warren Commission. What, was I there rubbing Earl Warren's shoulders while he did this stuff, you know? This happened before I was even born. This happened when my mother was a child. And it's like, another thing is whether it's trying to take Oswald and make him into a hero, or make Garrison into a hero, or make Earl Warren into a villain. Like, once I got to university and I began to study American history at the university level, you quickly find out Earl Warren is not a villain of history, not by any stretch, you know. Earl Warren was one of the best Supreme Court justices America ever had.
Actually, if you want a book that treats the Warren Commission on a granular level, you want to read Cruel and Shocking Act.
I did read that.
You did?
I did, yeah. Okay. That I found very interesting. Because it is very much an insider's view of everything that went on, you know?
Exactly. So they talk about the Warren Commission as if it was some kind of a monolithic. It wasn't, you know. There was a lot of dissension within the commission itself. And I think two people actually dissented with the final conclusions. Russell and I forgot who the second person was.
It was the two people that were there the least amount of time. I know that.
Right, exactly.
One of them was Richard Russell. I don't remember who the other one was either, yeah.
LBJ felt it was, till the end of his life, that it was a communist conspiracy.
Well,
if you look at his interview with Walter Cronkite, the very last interview that he gave.
It was... I mean, it was definitely influenced by communism, but I would hesitate to say it was a communist conspiracy.
Okay, yeah, I'm willing to concede that, actually. If Oswald during his time in Mexico City was influenced by local communists or local Cubans to carry out, they egged them onto this act.
Yep.
That is very possible.
Yep.
So technically, yeah, that would be a conspiracy, but...
I mean, you could have had the situation where it's like, you know... Sylvia Duran meets him at the embassy. You know, I got to make a comment about it. Everybody always comments on how hot Sylvia Duran was, but honestly, I really don't see it. I
think she was, but in her younger days.
I mean, I've seen photos. She's not unattractive, but I don't really think she's this bombshell everybody makes her out to be. But anyways...
I have a weakness for Hispanic women.
So you are not objective on this subject.
No,
but anyways...
in fact, I'm married to one.
She might have met him, liked him, thought, you know, here's this young American, he's a friend of the revolution. Mm-hmm. The official channels are kind of giving him a hard time. I'll take him out to the cantina. I'll let him hang out with the boys. Mm-hmm. And, you know, over a couple of cervezas, they talk some shit, you know, drink big drinks, talk big shit, as the expression goes. And he might have said something to somebody, but that's not a conspiracy. There's no overt acts where other parties are joining that conspiracy. Right. And it certainly isn't the conspiracy that conspiracy theorists...
It's not a high-level conspiracy.
...have been making out for like 60 years.
Exactly. And, you know, apart from the fact that there's no evidence that all this happened in Mexico City, there's a fact that it doesn't fit in with Oswald's behavior pattern. He was a loner. He didn't hang out with people.
No, I mean...
He never went to parties.
Maybe in the Soviet Union there was a brief period of that when he was, you know, the topic du jour in Minsk. But that very quickly passed, and he went back to a life of drudgery, living with his wife in the apartment and working, and that's it, you know? I was going to say something, but again, I lost my train of thought. It's, lately I've been thinking a lot about Lee Harvey Oswald's psychology. And I don't know if you had an opportunity to see it. I posted it a couple weeks back. It was a talk that was given at the Sixth Floor Museum by a psychiatrist, and it was entitled Toward a Psychological Understanding of Lee Harvey Oswald. He opens by showing the fake selective service card that Oswald created. And I mean, that card, it's so laughably bad that it would not pass muster with any person familiar with a selective service card. So ironically, the people you would most want to accept your fake ID are the most likely to immediately recognize it's fake, right? But that's who Lee Harvey Oswald was. He was very much living a fantasy life inside of his own mind.
He fancied himself a spy or something.
Yeah, a spy, a political militant. Recently in our history, there was the case of that guy, Elliot Rogers, in California. You're familiar with this? The incel guy?
More or less, yeah.
So he was like an upper class guy. He came from a wealthy family. He drove a BMW. He had brand name everything, including the firearms that he eventually killed people with. He had like top shelf stuff. But his whole thing was his pathological hatred of women, which was largely informed by his hatred of his stepmother. So really, underneath that all, what it really was nihilistic, self-centered narcissism. And in this particular case, that nihilistic, self-centered narcissism, it took on a gendered connotation with his attitude towards women. In Lee Harvey Oswald's case, I think it's something very similar. It's narcissistic nihilism, and in his case, because the Cold War was so prominent in his time and in his culture, it took on that connotation as like a politicalness. But I think that underneath it all, those two guys are actually very similar types of people.
Very similar, yeah. I mean, the human mind is so complex, right? I mean, and even back in the 60s, when they did psychiatric evaluation on Oswald, even back then, when the science was so primitive, they said something's not right with this guy.
Yeah.
I was watching that Nova documentary, and they interviewed this. I think she was a child psychologist or a social worker in New York who knew Oswald. Jewish lady, I forgot her name. But she said that this kid, there was something, I figured right then that there's something not right with this kid. He's built a wall around himself.
Yeah.
You know, and he just totally just wants to be left alone. And she said there was a coldness, a kind of lack of empathy in this person.
Well,
even at that early age.
Yeah, it's still noticeable. There's an old Jesuit saying, it goes, "Give me the boy, I'll give you the man." So I think that you can see things present in people's childhoods that will influence them as they go through their socialization process. But, you know, Lee Harvey Oswald, the psychiatrist who gave that talk with the Sixth Floor Museum, he comments that his family, they were all like half orphans, you know. Marguerite had lost her mother at the age of 4, and Lee Oswald, he lost his father when he was still an infant, so he never got to know his father at all, except in the context of, your father has died, you know? He died on a Saturday morning while he was mowing his lawn. His mother had him interred before the sun went down that day. So it shows fundamentally that she was not capable of expressing emotions in a normal, healthy way. She just wants to get rid of it and be done with it. His two brothers, his brother Robert went into the Marine Corps. His brother John Pick went into the Coast Guard. Both of them would later comment that they did this exclusively to get away from Marguerite, to get out from her overbearing, you know, tyrannical household. And Lee Harvey Oswald, as a young kid, he begins to romanticize the idea of running away to the Marine Corps, just like his brother Robert did, you know? So the second those guys could get out, they got out. The second he could get out, he got out too. During that interview when he was a young kid, he was asked, do you prefer the company of boys or do you prefer the company of girls? And he said, I don't like anybody. And it's partly a survival mechanism because, as Robert would later comment, their mother always let them know that they were a burden, that they were unwanted. So when you know, that kind of person isn't going to give a child the kind of emotional validation they need.
Right.
So Oswald's independence is a defense mechanism against that. He doesn't let people in so that he can't be hurt by them, you know? He himself described it as he had a fierce streak of independence brought about by neglect, which is true. I mean, self-assessments, sometimes they're not accurate, but in
Oswald
this case... Yeah, Oswald said that about himself.
When did he say that?
He, in his historic diary, I believe,
okay.
he was giving like a little biography of himself.
Yeah.
He said that he was the son of an insurance salesman who died when he was young, and he had a fierce streak of independence brought about by neglect. That's how he described himself in his own words. So, you know, I think there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about his psychology today. Fred Litwin commented on it when we were in Dallas last time. He said, you know, if Lee Harvey Oswald were alive today, he would love it. He would be one of these social justice warriors, you know. He would be an activist, a militant. He would fit in just fine today, no problem.
He would.
In this,
I can imagine him in a group like the Antifa or something like that. Yeah.
You know, in this way, he was considerably ahead of his time, I guess you could say.
Yeah. He was totally. He totally was. And let's face it, this is probably the only successful thing he ever did in his life.
You know, it's ironic because the only successful thing he ever did in his life had far greater impacts than he could ever known. Like, Jack Ruby really jerked that guy over by killing him, man. He didn't even he got to enjoy it for like less than 48 hours before Ruby plugged him.
Yeah.
Bill Brown in his...
Poetic justice.
Yeah. Little brash justice for you there. In his interview on Quorum Radio, Bill Brown, I think it was on Quorum Radio, I can't remember his Quorum, no, it was with his interview with Chris on the C Show. He recounts the story of Detective Lavelle and Lee Harvey Oswald's last words. As they were descending the elevator to get into the car to go to the county jail, Detective Lavelle handcuffs himself to Lee Harvey Oswald. And he says to him, okay, Lee, I'm with you now. If anybody takes a shot at you, I hope they're as good a shot as you are. This is a compliment, right? Yeah. He's paying him a compliment on his marksmanship. Mm-hmm. And Detective Lavelle later clarifies that he did this with a motive. He wanted to gauge Oswald's reaction to see how he responded. Oswald smiled and he said, oh, you're just being dramatic. Ain't no one going to shoot at us. But imagine that scenario. You have been framed for the murders of two people. One of them is a Dallas police officer. That's bad. One of them is the President of the United States. That's infinitely worse. You are looking at the possibility of being executed for two murders you did not commit. You know, you're not going to see your children again. You're not going to see your family again. You're going to be dead in the not too distant future. Are you going to laugh and smile and accept the compliment about your marksmanship? No. He smiled because it was an involuntary reaction. He was getting narcissistic gratification from somebody recognizing his ability. That's what he wants. He wants recognition. He wants people to understand that he's something special. And maybe the Russians don't think so, the Cubans don't think so, the Americans don't think so, the Marine Corps didn't think so, his mother didn't think so, but you know what? They're all wrong. He's greater than. His whole life, everybody's been thinking he's lesser than, but they were all wrong, and now he's finally proved it. Look at his face when he's got his fist up in handcuffs. Like,
he's got that smirk.
Yeah, and that is something that people who knew Oswald commented, that he had that kind of smirk, that kind of like.
Now I stuck it. I showed you. I showed the world. Yeah, that kind of
it's narcissism. Yeah. It's like people's body language can reveal a lot. Because it's like a blind person, right? Blind people instinctively smile when they are happy, despite the fact that they're blind and they've never seen another person exhibit that behavior. So this can't be learned behavior because they've never seen it to be able to learn it, right? It's just ingrained within the human mind, the human psyche. So I think that in his last words, that's very revealing, you know? He smiled because he was happy. Yeah, you are a good marksman, Lee. And in an ironic turn of events, people are going to spend the rest of history arguing that you were not.
No, and it's even the response that he gave Lavelle. That's an indirect admission that he actually did shoot the president, right? He didn't deny it. So what do you mean? Like, if he was innocent and he was framed, what would have been the logical thing to say? Look, I didn't shoot anybody. You got this wrong. Yeah. Right? Not, hey, you're being dramatic. No one's going to shoot at me. And if you were framed for 2 murders of which you were innocent, would you not be afraid for your life?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you be afraid that somebody would silence you?
Yeah.
Why would you say nobody's going to shoot at me?
Yeah.
So that really shows that there was nobody else behind this. He was alone.
It's all there. It's all there. You just have to put the pieces together in such a way as it makes sense, you know? That's it. Like, when I was having that discussion with Rob Clark, I said to him, you know, the single bullet theory, it's not like there's some other explanation that I could potentially adopt, you know? Like, what's the other explanation? There isn't one. And as the years go on and as the decades go by, it doesn't seem to me like anybody's interested in coming up with one, you know? So it's just like, what do you want? If there's a better explanation, okay, let's discuss that then. Explain to me how that makes better sense, you know?
And he didn't have a better explanation.
No, the single bullet theory, it provides a working explanation which uses the facts that we actually have available. It doesn't provide like a not working explanation that does not use those facts, you know?
And when this single bullet theory really sank in my mind, I mean, my respect for Arlen Specter and David Bellin went up the roof. Now, I said, these guys are
one of the grossest lies ever forced on the American people.
It's a work of genius.
Well, I mean, the thing is, Specter and Bellin, they get a lot of heat for that.
Yeah.
But the honest truth is, they're not even its original author. The original author of the single bullet theory, in my opinion, is Commander Humes and the Bethesda pathologist team. In the autopsy report, less than 24 hours after the shooting, what did they say? That a single projectile fully transited the president's body without making any bony contact at all. That is the crux of the single bullet theory. The crux is that the bullet went in his back but did not exit the throat, and the throat wound is another entry wound. But if it's one entry wound and the throat is the exit, that's the single bullet theory in a nutshell right there. That's where most of the disagreements are, you know?
Yeah.
For me, there was a moment where I saw the